Hello everyone, it's me Sarah. Welcome back to my channel. So today is going to be my July-August reading wrap-up. Now, if you've been following me for this whole year, you know I was doing quarterly wrap-ups, and I was averaging about, 17 books every 3 months or so. Well, it's been 2 months and I've read 20 books already, and I'm probably going to finish the 21st today. And if I were to continue doing this quarterly, I would have however many X amount more to add on to my end of September wrap up when I did the 3 months. So I decided to do it a little bit early this time around, and I'll probably do it every 2 months for the rest of the year. And if I'm going to keep up with this reading momentum, I'll probably end up going back to monthly wrap ups, because I don't want to talk about 20 books every time that I'm doing this. So we'll see. We'll play it by ear, see how it goes. But let's get into what I read throughout the last 2 months. So the first book that I picked up in July is This Is Love, Baby by Kay Webster. This is the second book of the Love and War series. I didn't anticipate reading past these first 2 books. I may delve into the third book just to see if I want to continue on or not. But for the most part, I think I'm happy with reading just these 2. And because it follows the main couple that I care about. But knowing who has the third book, I'm a little bit curious to see how his story is. Just a little bit. But I don't plan on reading anytime soon. It's just something that I'll probably eventually pick up at some point later on down the line. I ended up giving this one 4 stars, whereas I gave This Is War, Baby 5 stars, because that book was so good. This one kind of killed my expectations a little bit for this couple, the ending of this, and I can't remember exactly what my thoughts were, but if you go back, I have this in a reading vlog somewhere, where I didn't like the whole back and forth between Gabriel and Brandon, I think is what his name was. It was Bailey's boyfriend that was witness to her kidnapping by Gabe. I think his name's Gabe. Gabe. I'm sorry if these names are wrong, but I'll fix them if they're wrong. There was a lot of back and forth between the 2 of them, and I'm like, what is going on? I don't care. Where is Warren in all of this? He's the one I care about. And he doesn't even come in. I was so irritated because he doesn't come into a big chunk of the way into the book, and I was like, can we get past this, please? Because I don't care. So it was a little bit disappointing in that aspect, because I'm like, I don't care about these other 2 guys. And Brandon turned out to be not who I thought he was going to be, and I didn't like him. So that one was 4 stars. Next was a book that I was highly anticipating, and that is Reaper by A. Zavarelli. I loved this book. This is the second book of the Boston Underworld series, the first one being Crow. This is the one, y'all know, I was so eager to read, and this is Ronan's book. He is the killer, the enforcer, the whatever of the McKenna syndicate for the Irish mob. I give this book 5 stars. I loved it so much. It is the story of Sasha and Ronan, and in the previous book you kind of get an idea of the tension between them, but we don't really know obviously what happens until we get to this book, where he actually kills somebody for her, and then they both have to keep it a secret. I loved this book, and you learn how truly dark Ronan's past is. And this is the book that really reminded me of, I think it was season 3 of Sons of Anarchy, where they go to Ireland because Jax's son is kidnapped and taken to this I don't know what you would call it, orphanage sort of deal, where the children are taken by the IRA. I think it's the IRA or some kind of radical group, and raised to be soldiers, and their emotions are stripped of them, and they're literally if it's survival of the fittest, and there are literally children dying in this because they can't survive the training process, and flashbacks of Ronan's growing up and Ronan's childhood. It is so heartbreaking. This book made me cry. I think it's the first book of the year that made me cry. So angsty. I love it so much. There is a surprise pregnancy trope in this, this is when I love it, because you kind of see it coming. It's alluded to. because there's a few moments where they have sex and don't use protection, and like Sasha's like, you realize this is like the third time you fucked me without any kind of anything. But it's so good. I love it so much. I highly recommend this series. It's an older series. It's a completed series. I do have books 1 through 4, but I still need to finish, like, continue with the series. I was so happy to get to this one. Next, I read another. I was in a big mafia kick. I still kind of am, but I read Ivan by Sophie Lark. This is the first book of her, I think she's called Underworld series. I think that's Boston Underworld, and then hers is called Underworld. And I know these are older. This is an older series. I don't know if it was her first series, but I know it's definitely an older series that was remarketed and retitled and renumbered. Anyway, we have Ivan. This one was really good. I gave this one 4 stars. He is, I think, the head of the Bratva, or he's like a big guy in the Bratva. She is a hired assassin. She gets hired to assassinate Ivan, essentially, and she's the first person that's ever come as close as she did, where she's literally in his bedroom ready to kill him when he wakes up and sees her there. And then he kidnaps her, keeps her captive for a little while, but they have like undeniable sexual tension and chemistry, so that he ends up kind of like telling her like these issues he's having with a rival dude, and they kind of work together. She gives him kind of input on things. It's really good. It's a really good series. I cannot wait to continue with it. This was actually my first Sophie Lark that I read, and I really cannot wait to read more by her. Then next we started the Clifton Forge read along with Jess from Peace Love Books, Sam from Sam Reads a Little, and Tori from Novel Life. So they read 2 books, or a book a week. Every 2 books they had a live show discussing the book. So the first one was Steel King. This is Dash and Bryce's book. This sets up the entire thing for the series. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. This is pretty much he's the former head of the Tin Gypsy Motorcycle Club, the former president. He runs the Clifton Forge garage. Bryce is a reporter coming into town to take over I think her father bought the newspaper in town, and she like owns half of it, and goes in town to work for him, and then kind of gets in with Dash to learn about what happened to the motorcycle club and why they disbanded, and get to like the bottom of what's happening. Meanwhile, there's a murder that takes place, and that kind of takes precedence over everything else. It's really good. I highly recommend this series. The rest of the series is going to be in this video as well, because I did read the entire thing in the last 2 months for the read along. But before we got to the second book of that, I read The Secret by Julie Garwood. This was the Historical Hellions pick for, I think it was for July actually. No, they read Ransom, which was the second book of the series. But I wanted to read The Secret before I read Ransom, and decided that I didn't want to read Ransom because I did not like The Secret. I was very close to DNFing it. I hated it so much. I didn't like the writing. I thought the heroine was annoying. I thought the hero was an alpha hole, like to the point where I love alpha heroes. He was just, I could not stand him. And I feel like I'm in the minority with this, because everyone in the historical romance community seems to love this book, and I just did not. I gave it 2 stars. I literally skimmed like the last chunk 70 pages of the book because I wanted to be done with it, and I didn't want to DNF it. In hindsight, I probably just should have, because I don't feel like I gained anything from it. But that's a book that we're just gonna not talk about anymore, because I'm done and it's over with. And I totally forgot to even hold it up for the entire thing, because I own it, but I want to like just get rid of it now, and make room for something else on my shelves, because I don't care. I also have Ransom, which I had before I got this one, and I'm just like, I'm so upset that I didn't like this. I'm so disappointed. I think y'all led me wrong. Next, we jumped back into the Clifton Forge read along with the Riven Knight, which is the second book in the series. This is Isaiah and Genevieve's book, and this was probably my favorite book in the series. I gave this one 5 stars. I loved it so much. This was another surprise baby trope, but it was very similar to what happened in Reaper with Ronan, because their characters are similar in that they have such tragic pasts and horrible things that they did. They don't think they deserve love of another person. They don't think they are going to be good fathers. They don't necessarily want to be fathers because they feel like they're afraid they're going to destroy their children's lives, and they're going to be deadbeats and not live up to what their family would deserve. And it's just so angsty. Now, Isaiah, if you are familiar at all with Devney Perry's books, her Lark Cove series, there are actually a few different spin-offs. Like, so there's a lot of overlapping and introduction of characters in other series. So like, we'll just do Isaiah for instance, because this is the book we're on. But in Tragic, which is the third book of the Lark Cove series, you kind of get an idea of Isaiah's origin story, because in this book, he talks about he's out of prison from the events that happened in the book Tragic. And it's Tragic is his older brother Nick's book, like his story. And now we're getting Isaiah's story. So if you read Tragic, it hints at his brother moving to Clifton Forge and getting a job at a garage. And it's so good. Genevieve is a character that was introduced in the first book. She is, I don't want to give spoilers, but she's a very important character from the first book. I'm very happy she got her book, this book. And the trope pretty much along with surprise pregnancy is marriage of convenience, because of something that happens at the end of the previous book. Her and Isaiah have to get married to essentially protect each other, or to protect him mostly. And they live together and have to lie to their friends, and it's so good. I love this book so much. It's my favorite in the series. Next, we were on a good kick after this, because next is probably one of my favorite books of all time, and that is Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman. I give this book 5 stars. I would give it 10 if I could on Goodreads. This book was phenomenal. I cannot recommend this book enough to people, but just know that this is the epitome of dark romance. So this is an enemies to lovers, captive, kidnapping, forced proximity, PTSD. Like, there's a lot that happens in here. So, but like the first less than 100 pages or so of this is our hero, our couple, our hero and our heroine, Dean and Cora, are kidnapped together. Now, Dean is Cora's sister's fiance. So they're at her sister's birthday party. Cora gets stranded at this bar. No one's answering her to pick up. So she calls Dean, and Dean comes to get her. And on the way home, they are kidnapped by this psychopath serial killer whose motive is he picks people that are not at all, like, they're not a couple, they're not related, they don't necessarily like each other at all, and he forces them to fall in love before he kills them. And one of the ways that he does that is he keeps them trapped together in this basement and forces them to do sexual things with him. Like, he rapes her. It's not explicitly on page, but it's there. So just know that going in, like, there is rape in this book. And then he forces the hero to do similar things to her, which is on page. And it's crazy. Like, this book is very dark. I don't know how to say this enough, but it is so good and so emotionally draining. Like, I sobbed when I finished this book. So once they get free, and once they're free, the rest of this book is them coping with what happened, figuring out how to live independently again, because they're the only people that understand what each other went through in that situation. And it's, at first they cling to each other, and then they realize, okay, maybe it's not necessarily healthy for us to be so codependent like that. And then trying to break apart, and just things happen, and it's so good though. Like, it's so good. You guys, everyone needs to read this, as long as you can if you're okay with some of the dark things that happen, like the rape, for instance. There is a miscarriage, a very early miscarriage. There is suicide attempts, self-harm. There's a lot of dark things in this, but Jennifer Hartman does the emotional, like, she does it so well. Like, I just want to sob for these characters. And I want to actually read more by her. This is my first book by her, and so far the only one, but I really want to read Lotus, who is it's based on a character that was briefly mentioned in this book. You don't have to read this to read Lotus, but I want to read his story. and I really want to read June 1st. Like, I want to read her whole backlist. I need to get a hold of it first. Next, and then I already mentioned this book earlier when I was talking about Riven Knight, Tragic by DEVNEY Perry, which is the third book of the Lark Cove series. This is Isaiah's brother Nick's book. I don't remember the heroine's name in that, but I wanted to get a sense of Isaiah's origin story. I read Tragic after Riven Knight, but I just loved the story that went along with that. So we get Nick's story. Pretty much it's a grumpy sunshine sort of deal. He loses his, I don't know if she was his fiance, but she was the mother of his child, his unborn child. They both die in a car accident. That's like the very beginning of the book. And then his brother was responsible for the accident. So he hates his brother. He lost his family. He wants nothing to, his mother sided with his brother and the whole thing, and he just like doesn't want to deal with any of them. So he literally just buys a cabin in the middle of the woods. Then we have our heroine, who is, if you read the first book, which is Tattered, I think his name's, was it Logan? His secretary from New York is the heroine in this book, and I can't remember what her name is, but she moves from New York to Montana to do her work for her boss after her fiance, I think it's her fiance or her husband, cheats on her. She wants a divorce. He doesn't want a divorce. And she renovates this house that she bought that's right next to Nick's cabin, and he's a woodworker, which is really cool. And they kind of are forced to deal with each other because her contractors are making a hell of a lot of noise, and he's like, what the fuck is going on? It's really good. I really enjoyed this. This is also another surprise baby trope. But so far, the ones that have happened with, it fits in with the storyline. Like this, yes, he lost a child. He's terrified of losing another one. So naturally, there's going to be one that comes up in the book. So it makes sense. I ended up giving this one 4 stars, mostly because it got really, really annoying with her ex, and she was constantly letting him get back into her life. And a lot of times she was doing it with Nick right there. And he's just like, you're kidding, right? Then after that, I needed an emotional break because Riven Knight, Still Beating, and Tragic were all very heavy with emotion. Still Beating especially. Tragic was as well. I mean, it's in the title. So I got something a little bit of a lighthearted read, and that is The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. This was my July book of the month pick, and I was surprised how much I loved this. I ended up giving this 5 stars. This is obviously a bodyguard romance, and the bodyguard is the heroine though. I forget what. I'm terrible with names. Sometimes I remember them, sometimes I don't. I know the actor's name is Jack. Hannah's her name. So Hannah is our bodyguard, and she is sent to guard our actor Jack, who has a stalker after him. And there's just some things that people are a little bit worried about. Like, it's nothing too crazy, but like he still needs to take it seriously. So she's sent to protect him, but it ends up becoming a fake dating, forced proximity sort of deal where his mother is dying or is ill, and he needs to go home and visit her, but doesn't want to scare her by telling her that I have to bring all these bodyguards and guards with me to protect me. So he asks Hannah to be his girlfriend, and they go to stay on his family's ranch in Texas, and they're kind of stuck there with all the protocols. Like, at a distance you have the rest of the team like surveilling the property and stuff like that, and it's really good. There's a little bit of a suspense thing that happens at the end, of course, with the stalker, who they don't necessarily it's not necessarily who they think it is. I enjoyed this like a lot. Then after that, we went back to the dark romance genre again with Born Darkly by Trisha Wolfe. I think this is when I started whatever that readathon was. It was a dark versus light. Romance takeover readathon, dark versus light. I picked the dark side, obviously. So I read Born Darkly by Trisha Wolfe. This is a very, very dark romance about a serial killer and a criminal psychologist or something. I forget what she is exactly. But there are some things that happened in her past that she's even completely blocked out, but he is like aware of, he knows she's hiding something deep down that is similar to him with his he like has this need to kill, but he doesn't kill. He's like one of those Dexter types where he kills like bad people, like child molesters and people like that. And she's trying to get, he is like somebody who is infamous, and she's been trying to get an interview with him for years and do like a case study on him, and he's never let her before until now. So she is completely intrigued by this whole thing, and he is intrigued by her because he senses there's something hidden inside of her that she doesn't even realize, and she is like have a stranglehold on because of dark things that have happened in her past. It is a crazy, wild ride, let me tell you. I have not read, this is a duet. I think the next one is Born Madly, but I don't have it yet. I do want to pick it up at some point, but crazy book. And then we're back at the Clifton Forge read along again, where I read the third book, Stone Princess. This is another famous actor one, with Shaw Valance, who is our actor who comes to Clifton Forge to film a movie based on the events that happened in the first two books. So we jump time about 3 years after the end of the second book, with Presley as our heroine, who is she's kind of like a sister to the guys at the garage. She is the office manager. This one I wasn't as thrilled about because it was like the least related to the MC, and it just kind of reiterates stuff that we already know happens, because it's literally Shaw making a movie about the stuff that we already went through in the other two books. I still really enjoyed it though. I really enjoyed their romance. I liked Shaw as a character. I found him interesting because he was a cop in his past before he became an actor. And then toward the end, we have a setup with Presley's sister Scarlett, who was introduced at the very end, and then it kind of builds for the next book. And I feel like that's how, feel like she wrote them in pairs, because you kind of have to read the first book to read the second book because it continues. And then of course there's a time jump, and then we have the third book that weaves into the fourth book, because especially what happens at the end of this book. So it was really good. But before I went to the fourth book of the Clifton Forge series, I read Beautiful Sinner by Sarah Kate. This was my first Sarah Kate book, and I know everyone loves her Salacious Players Club series a lot. I haven't gone into that yet. I haven't read it yet. I wanted to read something else like shorter by her first, but because I know how much that series is hyped, I was really excited for this one. And I was a little bit let down. It's a priest romance, which already has one check because I love priest romances. It's set in Ireland. That's 2 checks. And it's about an American girl who gets stranded in a bed and breakfast in the middle of the Irish countryside. So check 3. Like, this should have been a perfect book for me. Again, I don't remember exactly what I didn't like about it. I don't think I didn't like the romance hardly at all. The steamy scenes were really good. I don't remember if I said I didn't like the heroine. I don't remember names. I think he was a Callum. I remember saying that I liked the name Callum. So I was kind of just like, it was fine. I gave it 3 stars. But I still definitely want to try to get into her Salacious Players Club series, especially because I think all 4 books are out. Mercy just came out recently. Okay, then we jumped back into Clifton Forge with the 4th book, Noble Prince. This was a book that I was pleasantly surprised by, and I was really happy with. I ended up giving it 5 stars. This was Scarlett, who is Presley's sister, and Luke, who is the Clifton Forge chief of police. This is also kind of a forced proximity. I would say it's like a bodyguard adjacent sort of thing because of the events that happened in Stone Princess. She needs to be protected. He tries to put her in a safe house, and she wants nothing to do with it. She like runs off at the grocery store where he catches her and was like, okay, you can't, like, you need to stop. What can I do to make you stop? And she's like, I just don't want to go back to that house. So he has her move in with him, but she's on house arrest. She can't leave because there are people out there looking for her because of evidence that she has to incriminate them. And it is so fun. Some people didn't like this one. They thought it was boring. I ended up giving this one 5 stars. I loved Luke and Scarlett. I'm so glad they got their own book. So the next book after that I finished reading was The Tourist Attraction by Sarah Morgenthaler. And it took me almost the entirety of that 2 months to read it. I had to renew it once because I just was bored. I don't know if I just wasn't in like a listening and audiobook sort of mood, because all these other books I read physically. Half of them I read on my Kindle, and then there were half that were physical books. So I don't think I was in like a listening mood. I don't know if it was because I just wasn't into this one or just wasn't in a mood in general, but I ended up giving this 3 stars. That's a generous 3 stars. It's more like a 2.5. I think I upped it to 3 on Goodreads. I think this is one of those ones that I had high hopes going into. It sounded like something that'd be really up my alley. It was set in Alaska and like this resort touristy town, which I live in a resort touristy town, so I could relate quite a bit with the main character Graham, who owned a like really popular restaurant. He didn't want it to ever be a popular restaurant. He wanted it to be like a locals only thing, but little by little tourists happened to find this I guess I would call it like similar to like a dive bar sort of situation, and then all of a sudden it gained more and more notoriety, and all of a sudden it was this really popular like must-see tourist attraction that he was not thrilled about. And then our heroine, whose name I forget, is from, I think she's on vacation from the city somewhere, and I don't even remember all of it. It took me so long to read that I hardly remember plot points. I remember he has a dog named Jake, who is deaf, who is adorable. And there's a moose. I don't know. I wasn't a fan. I didn't like the romance a whole lot. And I didn't see the chemistry between the two of them. And it's a forgettable book, to be honest. And I had intentions of reading, I think someone said the second book. Thinks the second book is better, but I'm just like, I'm kind of over it. I don't want to read any more in this. I think it's a trilogy. So we're just gonna cut that off as a loss and move along. The book I read after that, though, was for the Brittany C. Cherry interview that I think it was Jess that did it. I think it was Jess. So I picked up The Air He Breathes, which is the first book of the Elements series. And I gave this one 4 stars. It was my first book by her. I know a lot of people really, really love books 3 and 4, which is The Silent Waters and The Gravity of Us. I don't have those 2, but I definitely want to continue on reading this series. It's not, I mean, it is a series, but it's like a standalone series. So like every book is its own book. You don't need to read them in order. There's no overlapping characters or storylines or anything like that. They're their own thing. They just happen to be related in the Elements sense, I guess. I don't know. But this one is also a fairly heavy emotionally wise, because we have both our main characters. I don't remember their names as usual. Tristan and Elizabeth. Okay, so Elizabeth recently lost her husband in a terrible car accident. So it's her and her young daughter. She was living with her mom for a little while. Her mom is like this man chaser after she lost her husband, and she's like, okay, I'm over this. So they end up moving back home where they used to live with her husband, and then find out that Tristan has recently moved next door. And now Tristan, in a similar sense, lost his wife and his son. I think it's his son, his child, in a car accident as well. He is a totally grumpy, broody character, a neighbor. Him and they have their meet cute is her almost hitting his dog. I think his name's Zeus, is a golden retriever. She hits him with her car, and then they find out they live next door to each other. They end up having a physical relationship first, where they use each other to remember their loved ones that they lost. And it's supposed to be strictly no feelings attached, no none of that. They're just literally just using each other's bodies. And then of course things get more complicated. One of the characters I love in this is Elizabeth's best friend, Faye. I really would like her to have gotten her own book and have her had a relationship with, I think his name was Sam, I think. Not the guy that owns the diner she works at, but the other waiter guy that she was like, threatening to fire all the time. I can't remember what his name is. I think his name's Sam. But anyway, so this was fine. It was a quick read. It was a good read for my first Brittany C. Cherry book. I remember the one thing I didn't like at the end was there was like a suspense element thrown in at the end with a character that I feel like was just used to create drama and could have been done differently, but it wasn't terrible. It was fine. So that's why I only gave this 4 stars. Then after that, I went back into dipping my toes into audiobooks again, and I listened to Look the Part by Jewel E. Ann. I listened to this book, and I gave this was another 4-star one for me. It was fun. It was interesting. It was a quick read, quick listen. This was an office romance, and it's, again, I don't remember names, but it's our hero who is a lawyer and has a son who is on the autism spectrum. Again, lost his wife in a car accident. Seems to be a running theme. And then we have our heroine who is a music therapy teacher who is in need of new office space. She works like alongside the hospital as well, but she also has her own practice. So she needs a new office space. He rents out the space above his law firm and doesn't realize that music therapy involves actual music and sometimes very loud and not very good music. So he gets super annoyed with that and he threatens to evict her. But things get complicated because his son develops a really close relationship with her. She starts teaching him about music and learning to play the guitar, and he gets really involved with that. So it makes it a little bit complicated for him to kick her out. But it's definitely more of a I can't do my job properly because of the ridiculous noise that you're making upstairs. And then things turn physical, emotions come in, all of that. There is, again, a surprise pregnancy in this book, but I didn't like it as much in this one because I think it was definitely used more as a plot device to bring the couple together. I think that's the thing that made them come together, and I was just like, I don't really like it when it's done like that. And I was listening to this. I often do other things while I'm listening, so I may have missed the clues, but I definitely didn't see it coming. Like in all the other books that it happens in, you can kind of, it's foreshadowed a little bit with certain things. This one I didn't see it coming until it was like we were happening. And I wasn't a fan of it. That's why I ended up only giving it 4 stars. But it was a good book. I definitely want to read more of Julie Ann's backlist. She has a lot of her backlist though, so I'd have to like pick and choose what I want to read. And then I read my second Elizabeth O'Rourke book. I read this in preparation again for the Elizabeth O'Rourke interview on Jess's channel. I had read Waking Olivia back in beginning of this year. It's in a different wrap up later on. So this time I read Parallel. This is under her name Elle O'Rourke because it's more of a paranormal, I guess, or I don't know what you would call time travel. Paranormal fantasy, sci-fi fantasy. I don't know what time travel is considered, but so this is an interesting book. I really need to get the second book Intersect because I gotta know what's going on. It ends on a cliffhanger with like so much information left wide open for you to have to figure out. This is our 2 characters, Nick and Quinn. And Nick is a doctor, a neurologist, but he does rotations and other things as well. Quinn is, I forget what, I think she's a writer for something. And she is engaged to be married, and while planning her wedding, when she was a kid, she used to have these dreams about this guy named Nick who she was married to, had all these different lives with, and they were so real. She thought they were real, and people were like, what is wrong with you? Like, she just kept talking about this guy named Nick, and her entire family thought she was a little bit loony, so they took her to get therapy, which finally stopped the dreams. But as she's looking for wedding venues for her wedding, something triggers her dreams to stir up again with much stronger than they were before. And then she has an episode where she meets the real Nick from her dreams in person, and everything just gets stronger and stronger. The dreams get more vivid, and it's like a whole thing. And then they find out that Nick has also been having, not necessarily, he has dreams, but like they're not as prominent as hers, and like he just has these feelings of like knowing her and like having this deep connection with her that neither one of them really understand, but definitely want to explore and figure out what's going on. Just be aware in this, there is cheating. I mean, I say it's like light cheating, but someone who doesn't like cheating will say cheating is cheating, and this isn't for them, because both of them are in respective relationships when they start developing feelings and hanging out with each other. Now, he breaks his off a lot sooner than she does, which is one of the reasons I did give this 5 stars, but I think I did it at 4.5, because her being hung up on her fiance and refusing to believe that this thing with Nick could be possible is just super annoying. And her fiance was just annoying as well. But yeah, so this was 5 star, 4.5. But definitely recommend this series. I know there's 4 books, I think, in the series. The first 2 deal with Quinn and Nick, and then the second 2 deal with a different couple. And I know Elizabeth O'Rourke in that interview said that she wished people would continue reading, because a lot of people only read the first 2 and then don't care about the other couple. And she's like, that's some of my favorite couples to write about. So like, I'm gonna definitely read all 4, but I really definitely need to read Intersect like sooner rather than later. And then we're back at the Clifton Forge readathon again. So the next book I read in that one is Fallen Jester, which is book 6, and that is book 5, sorry. And Fallen Jester is Leo and Cassandra's book. Now this book I had high hopes for. Again, another surprise baby trope, but this one we know the surprise is in the baby trope is introduced at the end of the previous book, so we know going into this that that's what this story is about, is Leo coming to terms with being a dad. And this is, Leo is grouped in with Isaiah and Ronan, absolutely, because of the way he was brought up. He was, I think his father left him, or someone left him. I think, pretty sure his father left him, and we don't really get a whole lot of his backstory, but he's been with the Tin Gypsies since he was 16 or 17, like he was hanging around their clubhouse, and just that's the family he knew. He was one of the guys that didn't want the club to end because it was kind of all he knew, but the rest of the guys voted unanimously to disband the club, so he just kind of went along with them. He doesn't want children, he doesn't think he'd be a good father, and he just wants nothing to do with Cassandra or his child. He even, in the very beginning, doesn't believe her, because he is someone who, every time he's known to be a player, he sleeps around a lot with everybody in town, and you see his conquests throughout the series beforehand, and he's someone who always wraps his stuff anytime he sleeps with a woman, and he's like adamant about it, and she's like, okay, well, you know, accidents happen and things happen. And poor Cassandra is a college student. I think she's 23. Like, there's an age gap in this as well, because I think she was 23 or 24 and he was 32. So there is an age gap in this. She was home from college to study for a weekend, and her friend convinces her to go out to the bar and hang out, and she has a one-night stand with Leo that results in her getting pregnant. And now she's like, fuck me, like, this is my life is freaking over now, and now I have this guy who wants nothing to do with me. But she's like, I'm not gonna force you to. If you want to be part of it, that's fine. Her parents are amazing in this. We love her parents, her father especially, because her father comes up and punches Leo in the face, which is well deserved. It's great. I loved it. I loved their relationship. The thing with this is the build up to the final book, the finale, wasn't exactly what I was hoping it would be. Like, I was hoping for a lot more. And when I talk about the next book, I'll talk more about that. But I ended up giving Fallen Jester 4 stars. Then we finish out the Clifton Forge read along with Tin Queen, which is the 6th and final book in this series. This is I almost said Presley. It's not Presley. It's Emmett and Nova's book. Now, this is the book that I was really excited for. Isaiah's book. I was really excited for Emmett's book. I had high hopes for it. It was the final book in the series. Nova is Tucker Talbot's daughter, and Tucker, if you read the rest of the series, Tucker is like the villain throughout the whole thing. Now he's in prison, put there by the Tin Gypsies, and pretty much at his own fault. His daughter is, I think she's a lawyer, but she is a secret. So Tucker never let anyone know that he had a family. So her sister May, and her mother were all a secret. So anytime she goes to visit him in prison, she wears a disguise, she wears a wig. But she was always Daddy's girl, whereas her sister was never a fan. Like, she never liked him at all, wanted nothing to do with him. Nova was Daddy's girl. She wants to avenge him. She wants the Tin Gypsies to suffer as he had. Not necessarily to kill them. She doesn't want any more bloodshed, but she wants them to be thrown in prison just like her father was. She thinks that's fair. So she goes undercover to hook up, like, her target. Like, in the previous book, there's a lot of danger happening with someone trying to kill Leo and making it look like an accident. But they get caught, obviously, at the end. So, and Nova is like, well, he was an idiot. The one to go after is Emmett. So that's who she goes after. Their relationship immediately turns physical. That's what it's based on. But she doesn't expect feelings to develop, and she doesn't expect these guys that she thought were her father's rivals and were horrible men were actually decent human beings. And so she starts to see things differently and starts to see the truth of what actually went down, and that perhaps her father wasn't exactly telling the truth about things that happened or about her life. So it was interesting in that aspect, like the father-daughter relationship. But the whole, it being a conclusion to this entire 6-book series, I wanted more from it. I wanted more escalated action. I wanted the Arrowhead Warriors, which is the name of Tucker's MC, to the guys that, because there were a few guys that got off like on bail immediately because they weren't really like as higher up as the other guys that were sentenced to several years and decades in prison. So I was waiting for them to cause real issues for the Tin Gypsies and things escalate and craziness to happen. It didn't exactly do that, but then I remembered, like, okay, it's a small town setting. Small town romances, yes, they have suspense and some danger aspects to it, but it's usually nothing as high stakes as I'm used to with, like, reading a dark romance. So, but I just wanted more from it. It's still a 4-star read. Overall, the series, I'd probably end up giving it 4 stars because there was 2 5-star books and the rest I gave 4. I think Stone Princess may have been 3.5, but still rounded it up to 4. So it's a great series. I still highly recommend it. I do want to read Devney Perry's newest series, which is The Edens. So that's Indigo Ridge, Juniper Hill, and then the new one just came out, Garnet Flat. So I do want to start reading that one. I don't know if I'll read the Jameson Valley series at all, except for maybe the characters that overlap with the Clifton Forge series, because I know Dash's brother, Nick, has a book. Is it Dash's brother, Nick? I totally screwed this up. So Dash's brother's name is Nick, and his is the Jameson Valley book. And that's the Clover Chapel, I think is his book, in the Jameson Valley book. Isaiah's book, Riven Knight, his brother is Cain. Okay, so Tragic is Cain's story, not Nick. I got that wrong. Hopefully I fix it in the editing and change the names around, but I got there eventually. If anyone's watching this and screaming at me because I got the names wrong, I got there eventually. I remembered eventually. But Devney Perry has so many things that overlap between her Will and Ash pen name and these books, and everything overlaps, and it's just like, it's a mess. So you gotta learn to keep it straight. Anyway, I do want to read Nick's book in the Clover, in the Jameson Valley series, and then someone else has a book. I think it was in one of the characters in the very beginning. Bryce mentioned she interviewed a character, I forget now. It doesn't matter. Anyway, I want to read the overlapping books and definitely the Eden series, and then we'll see. But the final book that I read, that I just finished the other day in August, is Taken by a Sinner by Michelle Hurd. Again, this is a book I tried to read before the Michelle Hurd interview on that Tall Book Girls channel, Cheyenne's channel. Didn't quite finish it, but this is one that also kind of didn't meet my expectations. I ended up giving this 3 stars. So this is a mafia book. It's the Greek Mafia, which doesn't exist, but Michelle Hurd did mention in that interview that it's fiction. She knows the Greek Mafia doesn't exist, but she made one anyway. So we have Nicholas and Tess. Nicholas is the head of the Greek Mafia. Tess is a film student of some sort. And her mother is marrying his father, who's the retired godfather of the Greek Mafia. So they're thrust together. He pretty much, Nicholas pretty much takes over her life. She wants this independent life. She's an introvert. She just wants to be left alone. He said, that's absolutely not going to happen. You are part of my family now. You have to act like it. So he has intentions of sending her off in an arranged marriage. She's furious about it. He ended up developing sexual attraction to her, doesn't want anyone else to have her, so he marries her himself. So it is a stepbrother, stepsister romance, technically. There's also, so I think, an age gap, because I think she's got to be early 20s, and he's probably in his late 30s, maybe? No, Emmett was in his late 30s. I don't know how old he is, but some sort of age gap in this. I definitely feel like there was needed to be more like mafia danger part of it in it. It was, a lot of it was just like brushed over and like briefly mentioned. So I definitely think there needed to be more to it than that. It was like a 400-page book, but like the spacing in the margins made it a lot shorter than that. I definitely want to read the rest of this series though, because Nicholas is part of the priesthood, which is a group of 5 heads of the mafia. So we have the Greek Mafia, Turkish Mafia, Italian Mafia, the Bratva, and the Irish Mafia. So they kind of form the priesthood and kind of work together, watch each other backs, make sure no one's on anyone else's turf and things like that. So, but each of them gets a book. So I'm excited I do want to read the rest of the series. The next, I think the 5th book just finally came out, which is what I'm really interested in reading, which is the Bratva book. It's Victor's book, because at the end of this one, you get to meet the heroine in that book, like when he kidnaps her. So that one sounds really good, but I gotta read the other ones first. So yeah, so I ended up giving this one 3 stars. Not my favorite, but I have high hopes for the rest of the series. Also, there's another, so this is her Sinners series, I think it's called, and then she has a Saints series, which I think takes place before this, and there are overlapping characters, so I might have to look into reading that one as well. But I have so many other things to read, like so many things to read, I don't even know where to start half the time. Do I read on my Kindle to justify spending my monthly subscription? Do I read my books on my shelves because I'm buying them anyway? Like, what do I do? Which is why I usually try to have one of each. I'll bounce back and forth. I'll read an ebook and a physical book, just so I can even make things work out in my favor, and I can bring something with me all the time. Currently, the book that is not on this list, but I'm going to give it an honorable mention, is Does It Hurt by H.D. Carlton. This was the Ravished by Romance pick for August. I did not finish this in time for the live show. I am still only 61% into it. Am I going to finish it tonight? I don't know. Maybe I'll try. It's getting late already. I've been putzing around doing filming and editing and doing all that today, so I haven't had time to read yet. But there are reading sprints tonight, so I'm going to get into those and hopefully read a bunch of that book tonight. I really want to finish it, but we'll see what happens. But that book so far is sitting at like a 3 for me. I don't want to go too much into it because I'll probably talk more about it in my reading vlog that's going to be coming up. I'm filming this on Wednesday. Yeah, so this will go up on Thursday, and then I'll be talking about my thoughts on the last few books that I read in Thursday's vlog. So I don't want to overlap too much, but it's sitting at a 3-star right now. It's marketed as like a psychological thriller, but like, I don't know if it really is or not. We'll see. There's things happening that like you're not really sure about, but we'll see. Anyway, those are all of the books, the 20 books. Can you believe it? 20 books in 2 months. I've already surpassed my Goodreads goal. I think I've set it at 50 books. I read 52 so far this year. 53 as soon as I finished Does It Hurt. I don't even know what to say to that, because I have read I think the most I've read since doing the Goodreads challenge has been 37 books in a year. I mean, I know there are people out there, my friend is up to like 100 and 20 books so far this year. There are people that have read in the couple hundreds, but like for me, 50 books is phenomenal, and I'm hoping to keep up with that momentum. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment down below. Tell me what your favorite book was that you read in the past month or two, or your favorite book, if you found a favorite book of all time yet, like I did with Still Beating. And that's it. I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.